James, my cereal, you can catch me at the Diary from Monist. Shout out to the Monist gang. Okay, cool. So 91% of people who watch my channel unsubscribed. So please do hit the sub button and like. Okay, so people ask me questions all the times, and I thought I should do question and answer videos. So the first question I'm going to address today is that I got was, James, what is a monist? So I actually got the term monist from reading the book The Science of Getting Rich. But this copy of the book I had was edited and commented on by Tom Butler Bowdon. And he described a monistic view of the universe is that everything in space and time is a flowering expression of the one spiritual substance. So monism is the lack of distinction between spirit and matter, and implies that we can bring whatever we want into our lives merely through the power of directed and purposeful thought. So my understanding of this idea is partly through the quantum physics of explanation of law of attraction, which I did a video on. I'll just leave it in the description, which crudely put says, so the thoughts you have send a signal to the quantum field, and the emotions that you have attract the results to you, because your thoughts and emotions is what makes up your state of being, so you attract what you are. So the second question was, James, negative emotions are natural. Are they really a bad thing? Because in self-development they make it become a bad thing. And how do you deal with them? Okay, cool. So that's the wrong way to think about it, in my opinion. So negative emotions are a blessing. They are natural and have a powerful role to play in our lives that we cannot live without and must be grateful for. However, how you use or handle them is important. In the field of psychology, there's something called distress tolerance, which is the skill to accept the emotion you are feeling without going into coping mechanisms. This is important because you have to accept and know that we are wired to experience the full spectrum of emotions. So if you see a lion, you're gonna be fearful. You're gonna have a fight, flight, or freeze response. And without that fear or whatever negative emotion in that context, you will not have a response and you will just die from threats that you should not have to die from. How you tolerate these emotions is based on your upbringing, which is the nurture element, and your temperament, which is the nature element. This is where the psychological term distress tolerance comes in. Because when you feel a negative emotion, don't lie to yourself that you don't feel it. Because your subconscious mind knows if you're angry and if you're lying. And if you suppress it, it will end up manifesting in other ways such as depression or coping behaviors such as alcohol, self-harm, etc. etc. So if something tragic happens to you, like a loss of a family, I don't lie to myself and say I'm fine due to law of attraction and whatnot. I personally take it and allow my body and emotions to go through that emotional state completely and sit down with it and just allow my thoughts to go. I don't resist, because what you resist persists. I get up, I'm good. I give a positive meaning to the event or extract a positive good from the event and synthesize my happiness. So the negative emotions are good in that they can play a role in telling you what is wrong. In the same way your car tells you your fuel gauge is empty and tells you that something is wrong, go add fuel. The idea is for you to do something about it and get back into the normal feel-good state. The only issue with negative emotions is when you stay there and you ignore the car telling you that the fuel gauge is empty, because you will live to regret it. Negative emotions tell you what you don't like. So stop doing what you don't like. And I say that with empathy and with wisdom, and of course it's not that easy to always change what you don't like. But the message you're supposed to extract from that example is the role of negative emotion in terms of how it can direct you. If I start a project, fear tells me that I'm out of my comfort zone. If I start something new and I get nervous or a fearful state, it tells me I'm out of my comfort zone, which is a good thing because it puts me in a state of alertness and awareness, and I translate that emotion or nervousness as a sign for me to move forward and not to be crippled by it. So it's not necessarily that negative emotions are bad. I think the emphasis should be more on how you deal with them, if that makes sense. Okay, last question. So this question originated from a conversation I was having with someone, and where they asked me, like, where do I see the world at 2050? What he was trying to paint is, with that question, was the horrible things that are going on in the world, like how humans are destroying the world, like how we're the cancer on earth. You know, I heard that question, and I'm not saying this optimistically or naively, but humans are doing great if you look at the actual science and the data on the earth. The earth is not crashing like the news tells you. And I learned this from looking at Marian Tupi's work, who's a globalization specialist. Here's a long list of reasons why I think we're progressing in a positive manner. I'll start off by this. In the 1830s, 95% of the global population was categorized as living in absolute poverty. By 2015, we have decreased that number to 10%, and the decline is continuously accelerating. If you look 12,000 years going backwards, the income per capita for most of history was $2 a day. Today, globally, it's $40 a day, and at the rate is accelerating. By 2100, it will be $60 a day. We're definitely not where we need to be in terms of wealth distribution, but there is extreme progress. Look, the global population is about to reach 8 billion people, right? But on global average, we're not running out of food. From the 1960s to 2017, the global supply of calories per person per day increased from 2,200 calories to 3,000 calories a day, and the FDA recommends a 2,000 calorie diet per person on average. We are doing way better than you think. Look, access to calories in Africa has increased. Yes, there are still people suffering, and I'm not being ignorant to that. But what I'm saying is, people tend to only see the negative. In 1870, if you look at the global average a child got education, it was 0.5 years of education in their lifetime. By 2010, it's increased to close to 9 years global average. Global literacy rate has increased. It's at 85% now, and in the sub-Saharan Africa, stands at 66%. We're reaching a life expectancy average of 72 years, which in the last 12,000 years is like good luck trying to see 35. No matter what angle you look at, it's just progress. I'm not negating the negative, but what I'm saying is there's two sides to every single coin. The Sahara Desert is shrinking, for example. Plants are producing more foliage due to the CO2, which is their food, in the atmosphere. Tree coverage in the world is increasing. From 1982 to 2016, tree coverage in the world has increased, which is counterintuitive to what the news tells you, especially with pockets of burning forests, which are important. But what I'm saying is, it's not necessarily the full picture. There's reason to be optimistic. There's reason to be positive. So example, for tree coverage from 1982 to 2016, in the US it has grown by 35%, and in China it has grown by 15%. There's a record square mileage of land taken out of economic activity in the world right now. And I'm not ignoring the environmental issues that are there, and because they should not be ignored, but I'm looking at this from a higher abstraction and saying that there is good. It's a safer world now, because if you look at climate change, in the last 100 years, the last number of people who have died by climate change has shrunk by over 90% in the last 100 years. Because we're better with technology, we can predict hurricanes, earthquakes, and build better houses. We're gonna get better and better. The world is not necessarily in shambles. There is progress. Even if you look at wars have declined drastically. Most wars right now are civil wars, and the intensity of the conflict has declined to an all-time low since the 1950s. My point is, there's a need to also recognize the positive aspect of the world and not have a doomsday mentality, and not feed your subconscious mind a doomsday narrative. That's a better way of saying it. even no matter what angle you look at this, even our brain power has increased. Population's IQ has increased drastically over time, which is probably the reason why we produce more than we consume. Because humans not only deplete resources, but we create them. I'm not being ignorant of the real serious problems out there and what's on the ground. And I'm not being ignorant of the necessity to acknowledge those problems, because that has a part in driving progress. But what I'm saying and bringing to you that is not the full picture. It's the universal law of polarity. There's always two sides of a story. We are progressing and have been progressing, and there's no reason to suggest that we won't continue progressing and to fix the real world problems. And don't get too caught up with media, because they get paid to make you fearful, because the hardware of our brain has evolved for us to make sure we're in a state of survival. So for example, most information that enters your brain goes through the amygdala, and that part of our brain regulates emotions such as fear, hate and aggression. The amygdala is always looking for something to fear. So the news specifically puts out content to get your attention. And the only way to do that is to target that part of the brain, hence they have to portray negative news. And a study supports this in McGill University by Mark Trussler and Stuart Soroka, who studied news stories that people chose to read. People choose to read cynical news. Even those who claimed that they prefer good news, majority of the time are only interested in cynical bad news. Here's another reason why people remain pessimistic. David Levari and Daniel Gilbert, which are Harvard researchers, accredited people's negative viewpoint due to what is called the prevalence-induced concept of change. So as we solve problems such as discrimination, for example, we create a new behavior from solving that problem. We tend to judge each new behavior within the improved context that we have created. So in another way to say this is, as we solve problems, we expand our definition of what a problem is. So when problems become rare, we count more things as problems. So when the world gets better, we become harsher critics of it. And this can cause us to mistakenly conclude that the world has not gotten any better at all. Our perception of our problems adapts to our level of life. To you right now, R1,000,000 will solve all your problems. But if you actually got R1,000,000, your brain will still interpret those problems within the context of you having R1,000,000 in the same way as it would interpret problems in the context where you did not have R1,000,000. Anyway, James Mansiri, you can catch me at Dad from Monist. Appreciate this. If you have any more questions, put it in the comment section. You can reach out to me on Instagram.